Welcome to the Alcohol Free Revolution podcast. My name is James Lloyd.
And I'm Steve Smith. We are both former professional drinkers turned qualified alcohol-free coaches.
And we're here to inspire you to explore your best life alcohol-free. Whether you're sober curious, considering taking a break, or already loving life alcohol-free, this podcast is for you. Each week, we'll share ideas, tools, and conversations with the leading voices from within the alcohol-free space.
And our goal is simple: to give you the confidence to try it for yourself with stories and strategies that show just how powerful pressing pause on the booze can be.
I coach high achievers, leaders and entrepreneurs who want to reset and regain control of their relationship with alcohol. I focus on breaking down the neuroscience of drinking, because once you understand what's happening in your brain, everything changes. You can find out more about me at my website, alcoholfreecoach.com. Plus, we've recorded a special bonus episode where Steve interviews me about my journey and my work. Just search the Alcohol Free Revolution, episode 9.
And I work with high-performing dads, helping them show up more consistently at home and at work, and also in their training, by building resilience and unlocking their true potential through an alcohol-free life. I'm also a qualified US ultramarathon coach. You can hear about my story in a bonus episode and connect with me on Instagram at sober.illiant or at soberilliant.com.
Before we dive in, a quick favour. Please hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss another episode.
And if you enjoy it, give us a 5-star review. It really helps others who are sober curious find the show, and together we can grow the alcohol-free revolution.
Thanks for listening. On with today's show.
This is Steve, and just before we jump into today's fantastic episode with our guest, I just wanted to highlight that today's episode does cover subjects around dark thoughts and suicide. So if for any reason you find that triggering, then we will not be offended whatsoever if you decide to give this episode a miss. On that note, thank you, and let's crack on with today's episode.
Welcome back to the Alcohol Free Revolution podcast. Today we welcome a very special guest, Mr. Harrison Ward, aka the Fell Foodie. A couple of months ago, I became aware of Harrison and his truly inspirational story of personal growth and transformation. We were connected via a mutual friend. A quick shout out to Gemma. And when I shared Harrison's story with Steve, we both agreed that this is a guy we have got to get on the pod. He is a really inspirational figure, and we're delighted that he's accepted. You know, his story has rightly attracted a great deal of attention and admiration. As a result, he's appeared on Mary Berry's Love to Cook series, as well as making many other TV, radio, podcasts and festival appearances. But today, he's hit the big time. Harrison, welcome to the Alcohol Free Revolution podcast.
Thank you, chaps. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. I've justifiably given you quite a big build up there because I think you deserve it. But perhaps you can start by just sharing a bit about your journey of where you've come from to where you are now.
That was very kind. Thank you for all those accolades in there. It's difficult to hear sometimes, really, but it's really a different journey to what I was on previously. Obviously, these days I'm best known for sort of time in the outdoors. I'm best known perhaps for taking a little camping stove into the mountains and trying to cook sort of nice food on a little camping stove to show that it's not just pot noodles and beans on toast perhaps for breakfast if you are out there, or brilliant hiking trips to little soggy cling film sandwiches on the mountain tops. But for me, it was a very, very different life I was on previously. I found myself stuck in the hospitality trade for quite a number of years. An aspect that really was my career, but also on the side, I think I was a bit kid in a sweet shop. And again, of course, with the topic of this podcast, it's under no illusion perhaps what that was at the time. But it really sort of stemmed from my teenage years, really sort of going through, I suppose, puberty and the major change, and finding myself almost overnight really struggling with this sense of sort of self-loathing, very sort of demotivated, insecure, a lot of things that gave me a lot of sort of passion and purpose before that. I was a very sort of extroverted sort of character previously, you know, and lots of things were happy-go-lucky. All of a sudden seemed to be stripped away, and I really didn't find the same joy in these aspects that I had previously, and didn't know what was going on at the time. But I think when you are sort of going through those moments sometimes, or perhaps of darkness, and for me that was the start of a lifelong journey now, it was something that I didn't really want to share with anybody else. I didn't want to bring people down with my problems and things. So I kind of buried them, I suppose. I buried them inside. I put on a bit of a mask, if you will. And I was kind of really just trying to showcase that everything was fine underneath and continuing on on the path that I suppose I was being told to follow. I suppose educationally wise and bits in there, and it was one of those that really inside. There was points where I really didn't really want to be here at all. I was really contemplating my existence, contemplating my future, and it was a really confusing moment because I suppose looking back as well, retrospectively, it was a time where there wasn't really the same sort of talk about sort of mental health and things that goes on now, I suppose, in terms of sportsmen, sports people, film stars out there reaching out about what their problems are. So you really felt quite alone in this, feeling like all of a sudden, well, what's gone on? This is suddenly overnight for me. This is how I feel now, and there was no real way out and no route to change. And even sort of, I suppose, between peers, and I was working a Saturday job at the time. I'd got a job at sort of 13, washing some pots at the local pub, and that was the start of the hospitality journey that we'll come back to. It was really something that you couldn't share again with, I suppose blokes in the pub or even people in the family because there was that sort of attitude, I suppose, of, boys don't cry and keep calm, carry on in those bits as well. So it really seemed as if it was a weakness even sharing those moments of not feeling okay. So it really sort of stemmed from there for me, the initial path that moving through hospitality from that washing up the pots in the back of the kitchen into sort of waiting some tables, maybe around 14, 15. I finally got a job behind the bar, 18, alongside my studies. I was at sixth form at the time doing my A levels, and this was really my big introduction to the world of alcohol. That I suppose initially really, really gave me quite an escape. I suppose at the first journey, but I wasn't someone that was down the I suppose down the park with a bottle of cider or anything at the moment. I wasn't someone who was sneaking the booze out of the house. It was quite very much 18 was my sort of journey and change into that pattern. That initially I suppose was giving me quite an escape from what was going on inside.
It's interesting hearing you talk there, Harrison, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but we come from a very similar background. I spent my earlier years in hospitality, equally same as yourself, and kind of starting off initially. Well, I started as a busser, and then I made my way through onto the front, onto the waiting tables, and then onto the bar myself. And the impact that had on my early drinking career, if you want to call it that, was, I think, kind of set the stone to move forward. How much do you think that impacted you?
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, again, you often easily look back at these things, I suppose, of all the negative aspects of things. But there was a spell at that time, I think, that was a lot of learning, I suppose, a lot of life experience going on at that moment as well. I was very much introduced to people from different backgrounds that I hadn't really experienced before, I suppose. And there was a sense of almost a bit of camaraderie as well in sort of that environment at one point. So I think finding what I always saw as the living room kind of thing at the pub, it was kind of welcoming people into that room together. You all different backgrounds, people you wouldn't normally mix with in terms of sort of employment side, socioeconomic sort of status and things in there. So I did really, really appreciate that initial moment of aspects I was picking up about life from different people. And as well as that, it was also, I suppose, skills you picked up through different means, finding out even in the job itself in the moment. So there wasn't all the bad times, I suppose, initially, but really alongside that, I think obviously looking back at that moment and even later on in sort of the pub trade, as we'll get to, I almost see these people slightly differently, I think, looking back as well, because I think, like myself, a lot of these people, they weren't friends of mine in a certain way. They were more sort of acquaintances, really, and more people that were following that same pattern. So whilst we were almost in the same circle, running the same track in various ways, and whilst a lot of these people, again, they were still, great people with great stories to tell and things, they were almost trapped themselves in somewhat in this sort of cycle going further. But it was an aspect, I suppose, at first for me, it really gave me quite an escape from that mental sort of turmoil. I suppose just that, that a few drinks, calming the mind, I suppose, in bits as some people do, find that sort of crux, if you will, crutch, using that as maybe a little coping mechanism for various stresses. It was something that was kind of giving me that escape from these moments of really questioning my existence and questioning who I was as an individual. So at first, that became something that I kind of wanted more of, really. I think I kind of wanted that slight escape and that slight bringing me back to how I was, that happy-go-lucky character. So quickly, from a very, very low tolerance point, I suppose, of just sort of starting drinking at that moment and stumbling home from the boozer, it became something that I wanted more and more. And it went alongside, I suppose, taking more shifts at the pub. Again, I was still doing my studies, but really it was becoming more of a focus, the work side of things and being there. And as soon as the shift finished, it was the other side of the bar and being known as someone that was in there for all the social activities. You'd be heading down there. And a lot of my friends weren't really the same. They weren't really big drinkers and stuff. So you would find different groups to tag into that were suiting that same lifestyle as well. And I was really quite conscious that this was becoming quite a medicinal tool for me at that moment. I was using this. I wasn't again seeking help. I wasn't speaking out about what I was going through internally, but just finding my own method, I suppose, to try and shut that off and finding that moment, I suppose, of um, yeah, just that escape, that middle ground. But there was a certain point you hit where it became a point where that's it. The mind's clear. This is all fine, and then suddenly it was slipping off into that sort of oblivion and that demise. And really finding that balance was something that I was really beginning to struggle with at this point, moving forward. But yeah, so it was one of those that again did give me a lot of opportunity, a lot of aspects and different people in character, but was also providing again this kid in a sweet shop mentality, as I mentioned beforehand. But things were still going okay on the other side. So studies were still going strongly, just about. My attendance was getting a bit shaky, but otherwise we were grand there. And I was working sort of up as well at this sort of job, which was becoming, I suppose, not a career at that point, but I suppose working more into management. Before I decided to move away to York for university.
What sort of period of time would you say that was starting to escalate, Harrison? When, are we talking about a year, 2 years, 3 years?
So this, I mean, again, from getting that job behind the bar at 18, I suppose being legally allowed to sort of dispense alcohol at that point, I actually went to university a year later than normal. So I kind of changed my track in school, and I went to college to sort of do a different direction in things. That's a bit of a pattern in my life, perhaps maybe a yo-yo in between different things where you want to go in life. But by the time I moved away to university, again, I was regularly in the pub every day. At this point, I was drinking quite heavy numbers, I suppose, already at that point. And moving away to York at 19 and sort of starting that freshers week, I suppose, meeting new people, which again was all alcohol fueled. All
Of
these
course, yeah.
aspects, the whole culture around this was always alcohol fueled. So
Yep.
particularly maybe growing up sort of in the countryside, I was outside Carlisle. I maybe should have mentioned quite near the Lake District at the start. So yeah, and really that was it. It was kind of even when the memories of sort of Sunday lunch and the family coming together, all the blokes sort of went down to the pub beforehand and came back to the dinner. There was quite almost that still misogynistic attitude, perhaps in certain aspects, and it just seemed very much like that was the culture to follow. So naturally, when I was hitting 18, that was it. Well, this is what we do now. We go out and we socialise there. And by the time I moved away to York, I was very deeply ingrained into this pattern, this culture, this sort of, I suppose, right to manhood in various bits as it felt. And again, I was suppose I was the older one as well at university. So again, even a year at university, you were the old man. Well, 19 in various bits, but I was quite, I suppose, well versed in the practice as well as what I call. So, of course, all these new people coming together. It's all about that Dutch courage. It's all sort of social lubricant all around alcohol. So it was an environment that I quickly fell back into, no problem at all. And it was almost sort of finding that new clique and that new troop to move forward with. But very, very quickly, again, I found myself finding a job back in the pub trade because that was where I suppose I felt very comfortable at and very at home in. And again, at this point, I didn't have the backing, I suppose, I wasn't really wealthy parents or things in there or living off bank of mum and dad at university. So I was now trying to fund, I guess, this quite heavy drinking lifestyle as well because I didn't enjoy drinking at home throughout all this. I wasn't someone that drunk in my own four walls because that was really the point that I think I was alone with my own thoughts too much at that moment. So I always tried to get out and about under that guise of being social. But it was an excuse really looking back, I suppose. But that in itself, I suppose, drinking out in sort of establishments means it's a bit more expensive as well. So
Of course.
keeping that job going there was quite essential really to keep that medicinal tool going. But things really began to snowball for me quite quickly in York. So within about 3 months of being there, finding this job again, I think I'd gone full time in the pub straight away again, financially in there. I was finding myself in there even from the minute it opened. I was in the student union bar far more than I was in the lecture halls, skipping a lot of lectures the night before because just too hungover, and felt as if I can just catch up online. I don't need to be there and this sort of stuff. So the social side of things was very much out and about, and a lot of people in the early sort of weeks, I suppose, were all about sort of maybe the party in various bits and heading out there as well, but quite quickly they fell more into the discipline routes of going, no, I need to be in the library now, I need to study, and I've got this coursework to put in. Where I was kind of going, well, we can do both, keep both. That's it, all or nothing, all the time, and it was really then I suppose that people stopped sort of saying yes to coming out on the nights out so much, and I think I felt well I wanted to go out, so this was a point that I just started going out by myself. I just started going out alone because I was like, well, if no one else is going, I want to do it. Why don't I just go by myself and meet other people there? And I became quite this solitary nomad, I suppose, in the city. I was quite sort of well known in various establishments that I used to head into. But also that front of house setting, again, Steve, you'll remember relate as well back
Mhm.
against the hospitality side of things. It's a very sociable setting when you're in there chatting the conversations, both sides of the bar. So it quite naturally follows on into the drinking side, which no matter what side of the bar you're on.
I totally get that, I, you utilizing the bar as almost a crutch in itself. I mean, how much more confidence you have talking to people from behind a bar, and I guess that social aspect. Yeah, you're right, absolutely. Then just covers over into the evening and often the early mornings and right through the night. In terms of myself, I was more city based. I was London, but it sounds to me like the kind of environment you were in was more, obviously being in the lakes and Carlisle, it was that kind of local pub feeling to it, was it? Or sort of a working men's boozer, or what was the sort of style of the pub that you were at?
Yeah, I suppose at first, I mean, at this point, I've just moved to York, so I guess I'm getting slightly a bigger city now. And certainly it was an eye opener for me, I suppose, being the country sort of bumpkin where everyone shuts down at maybe 9, 10 o'clock midweek. This all of a sudden now was
Yeah.
a pub for every day of the year. I could just walk into town. Previously, it was like a 9 mile bus. So it was very, it was very much a different lifestyle for me. And again, that kid in the sweet shop mentality, I suppose all of a sudden now you're like, well, there's a plethora of options. There's places to go and places almost to hide as well, I suppose. Maybe you could go different spots that almost nobody knew you were there. You're a bit more of a number in the city, I think. So, it was around here. I mean, I picked up my first pack of cigarettes at this point. I guess that was, it wasn't a peer pressure thing, but I suppose again in the trade, it was often, you're seeing people go out for a smoke break all the time, whether it's from the kitchens or front of house, and you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, why are they going out there for 5, 10 minutes all the time? So I just grabbed that, for the irony of getting a bit of fresh air. Next
Mm.
minute you're out the back having a smoke, and that became a very social thing, sort of after hours too, I suppose. You're in the beer gardens of various pubs and clubs in the city. That's where you talk, where you couldn't get the music, and quite quickly fell into this pattern. And I said it really snowballed for me. I mean, my tolerance was heavily increasing at this point. I suppose I was drinking on the regular, so naturally tolerance was going up and up and up. And I was quite a big bloke anyway, I suppose, quite rugby build, which kind of went again. Those stereotypes, I suppose, that was it. It was kind of just bloke down the pub, puts a few pints away, it's hollow legs. Didn't want to be a lightweight and stuff. That was kind of not the mentality of it all too. But around sort of my 20th birthday, so I'd been there just over a year. I'd ballooned in weight to over 22 stone at the time. I was drinking in excess at my worst of sort of over 20 pints a day. And I was smoking sort of 2 packs of cigarettes a day. So what went from this kind of just naturally out of school, just kind of, oh, it's an 18-year-old lad just enjoying a bit of a drink. I think physically, although my inner turmoil wasn't really noticed at the time, there was a noticeable change in what was going on in my lifestyle. My studies began to fall by the wayside. I mentioned I was full time into the trade and I was highly functioning. So I was going up from just being the barman to sort of taking on sort of duty manager shifts, assistant manager. And then later on in this story, I guess I was managing the place full stop. So again, one of these, it wasn't something that was destroying my life in aspects. I was using this as a tool that was fitting around things. But looking back, I wouldn't have got away with this if I was in an office job or things, 9 to 5. I couldn't have
Mhm.
turned up like that, stinking of booze, bleary-eyed every morning. Yet in the pub trade, it was kind of not, it wasn't encouraged, but it was something that I guess in that environment could be slightly more covert, I suppose. So I did love the trade, and I really do encourage people to go into that as a first job because I think you do learn so much in various things going forward. But I think there is just so much also around there, perhaps in sociable hours, various bits around the moments of people you meet, the opportunities that are there that can make you fall into these paths if you are susceptible. But for me, I think it was one of those patterns that I stayed in longer, more because of what it was doing for me, as opposed to wanting this as a career going forward. I think it was suiting the lifestyle. So I got stuck, I think, in a while. I got stuck in that trade. Just really sort of, yeah, just using that as medicinal tools. But at this point now, it really is becoming quite a poison for me. And I'm not noticing myself. I'm not really saying that I'm not blaming the alcohol anything but at the time. Again, and that's obviously a common symptom I'm sure you've come across. Alcohol wasn't to blame, anything else,
Yeah.
anything but alcohol. But really, it was controlling my life already at this point and was really taking me down deeper, darker routes.
And what was the real shift for you, Harrison? Did you have a rock bottom moment as such? At what point did you decide that something needs to change here?
So I had a moment again around this time, my 21st birthday, I suppose. Again, another big rite of passage, I suppose, another big celebration. That again, is always spent in the pubs and clubs as it is. Or maybe slightly less so this than the next generation coming up. It does seem to be slightly changing. the
Definitely.
attitude of alcohol moving forward there. But that was a moment that again I had lots of friends come to visit me in the city for a particularly big celebration. I think maybe a 5 day set around the town, which was quite part and parcel, I suppose, for my my routine at the
Standard.
time. But it really that moment, I suppose, I had my first little, I suppose, wobble, I suppose, and crack in the armor, really, then that they all began to go back home to where they were from. And I think, other than this, again, I was this sort of nomadic drinker, as I mentioned before, quite solitary. I knew people in the places I was going to. I'd kind of catch on to different crowds. So I'd meet with sort of the old boys in the morning. They were in the papers, watching the racing sort of thing, and enjoy the sort of conversation I'd get from them, perhaps more so than maybe even my peers at university at the time. They'd all sort of go home in the afternoon. I'd catch sort of, the guys who were just finishing work. I'd go and tag on to them, and they'd think I'd had a couple of beers beforehand, even though I'd been out from maybe 11 and so. And they'd go home all for dinner, back at home 7, 8, and you catch sort of the evening crowd, and it'd be bumping onto the student crowd. And the next minute, I'm walking up, the last club sort of shutting sort of things. So I was kind of just traipsing onto these pockets, quite solitary, quite nomadic wise. But having these friends come to visit at this point, I guess it was back to sort of, this is it. This is the people that, I want to spend time of my life. And there was some, obviously, in York, of course, as well. Anyone listening? People I do stay in touch with. Landlords, if they're listening, though, maybe we've got some outstanding tabs going. So maybe let's show on there. But, but I think really it was that moment of, once they all went, the moment really of how actually lonely I was in this place sort of really hit me, I think. And the sort of the routine I was on of just constantly get up, shift, back to shift, back to drinking, back out again, wash and repeat. And I really had a moment that I stumbled home in sort of the early hours, and I didn't have a phone at the time. I was very reclusive. I didn't like people to bother me with my attitude, what was going on, I suppose. And there was already signs there, I suppose. Maybe my activity wasn't
Mm.
approved by all who were in my life, kind of thing. And you're going, well, they're bothering me. I'm fine. I'm not bothering them. But not noticing sort of, I guess, the knock-on effect of this. And there's a great quote I love these days about, alcohol being a really great dissolvent. It's a
Mm.
finances, a dissolvent of relationships, but never a dissolvent of problems.
Yeah, it's
And I think for
perfect.
me at the time, I wasn't seeing the impact it was having on other people. This was always about me not being a burden to anybody else. And it was kind of me just keeping myself present because I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to exist. I didn't want to live life, continue it on. But this was keeping myself sedated, keeping myself present in the world. But heading home that one night in the early hours, again, the last night everyone had gone home, I went to pick up a payphone near where I lived, and I called home to my mum. So it was about 3, 4 in the morning. I don't remember the call. She'll remember it a lot more vividly than I do. But I had one intention on the call, really, and it was just to say goodbye. I didn't feel as if I could carry on any further. I didn't feel as if, life was giving me that purpose. I'd fell down the track. Maybe I'd wasted a few opportunities, and maybe, even academically and stuff there. I'd left university by this point, and I was feeling like I was quite failing, really, I suppose. And the tool that had brought that, I suppose, initial bit of hope and escape from that inner turmoil that I didn't plan and didn't really, I didn't cause, that just sort of came about from nowhere, wasn't no longer providing that escape. But thankfully, of course, that wasn't to be at that point. But I did come back to Cumbria briefly at the time. I sought some medical help. For the first time, I sort of spoke about what had been going on. But in honesty, I was quite pissed off with myself. I was quite annoyed the fact that I'd let someone in. I'd let this sort of hidden secret out. And now I was getting sort of that double check-in from people now. And something, are you okay? Are you really okay today? And I was like, this was even more annoying than I found at the time for me. So it just pushed me further into going, no, I've got my method. I've got what's keeping me here. Just leave me be. So I didn't see myself at the point I do identify as an alcoholic these days. But again, the term doesn't really bother me so much. I think some people get really weighed down in terms of how they describe things. I mean, I couldn't care less how you describe me, to be honest. Whether I was a drinker, whether I was just someone that was using the tool, whether I'm sober these days, it doesn't really matter. For me, alcohol doesn't play that part going forward. But at the time, I was very much powerless to this substance. I was kind of something that I was using this every day. It was what I was doing. I was brushing my teeth with the stuff when I was getting up. I was coffee cup behind the bar. I missed out on sort of a friend's funeral, events in families that I put off all the way for alcohol to come first at every moment. So it really was controlling me. So I think if that defines that sort of terminology, then I'm happy to sort of define it that way. But coming back to York, again, seeking that help, I just went straight back into that same lifestyle. So I kind of didn't want to change. There was a moment of possible change. That was initial moment of my first realization of where I was going. But quite quickly, I just went, no, no, this is my method. This is what's working for me. Brought myself a train back to York and continued this same lifestyle for another sort of 4 years. Just wash and repeat, drinking to oblivion each day, and waking up and off we go again. And I suppose it's unsustainable in a way, really. It's something that's not gonna continue on forever that way. But I suppose that was kind of my attitude. I was very much the last priority of all things here. I was just keeping myself present, and alcohol kind of had that moment that would shut off a few of those pains and give you that escape sometimes from the stresses that were going on day to day. And I think really that was something that in this life now, in sort of sobriety, that's something that I've really noticed has the good and the bad in that setting. For all those moments that again I didn't want to experience, I didn't want to go through those darker moments, I could just drink away and shut off. Not having the alcohol present in my life anymore means I'm far more present for those better moments because I wasn't present for those when I was drinking.
Mm. Firstly, Harrison, thank you, because you've really bared your soul there, and you've shared a great deal, and I'm sure I echo with James. Thank you for being so honest and open and sharing such a journey. You mentioned there about when you had potentially, some may call it a rock bottom moment, but that moment when you were about to make that phone call, and then you went on to, I think you said 4 more years, and I'm sure in time we'll get to beyond how that looks now. How much do you think that evening when you were going to make that call impacted your final decision, which we'll come to shortly, and how much did that play on your mind over the following 4 years where that cycle continued?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wouldn't say it was something that was echoing around my mind going forward. There was a lot of regret, I think, originally. Again, as I mentioned about, I was quite annoyed that I'd let slip this sort of secret in this secret world. The alcohol, I suppose, I wasn't really that fussed by. That was kind of, I just saw that as, I'm a good drinker. I'm a big bloke. I put plenty of practice in. I'm in that environment. Plenty of other people are in there as well. It's not affecting my day to day. I'm keeping my job going. That wasn't the problem for me at all. But this had all stemmed from initially, I suppose, that mental turmoil when I was younger. So that was the bit I was kind of, that's the bit I saw as, that's the weakness. That's the bit, especially as the bloke, I can't talk about this, I'm upset, I'm sad, I'm not liking myself. And that was the bit that just didn't seem as if society was accepting upon. Where society was a lot more accepting about some bloke going out and getting pissed on a weekend. It was kind of those sort of spots. So that was the bit I was more worried about. And obviously, naturally, my mum knows, and sort of a close friend that was the last one that had left sort of knew slightly what had happened. So that leaches out, not gossip-wise at all, but of course that naturally gets spoken to a few of her family members, a few of her friends, and you're now thinking, like, people are now checking in on me a bit, really. And I hated that, really. I hated, I know, of course, it came from a great place. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the fact that that was a love and a caring thing. But at the time as well, I suppose, having this, I saw it as kind of you like the puppet on strings at times. Alcohol was sort of guiding you down these paths for us, but it felt quite like a possession for me, really, at times, where it was taking me down these tracks that, wasn't really me as a person, but was just kind of trying to keep myself on that straight and narrow. But when these people were checking in, it felt a little bit like that sort of puppeteer was on the shoulder going, oh, don't listen to them. They're taking you down another track. Don't we're fine as we are. Don't worry. There's plenty of people doing what we're doing, and they're all grand, and they're happy to hang out with you. And it was a strange spot. But it was something that I suppose as the years went on, it just kind of slipped back into being the normal sort of lifestyle. And my mum sort of, in later years, is kind of, in more recent times now, has sort of said that, she kind of, it was a very distressing call for her to receive, of course, waking up in the middle of the night, getting that call basically for the moment saying someone wants to kill himself. It's kind of, there wasn't really any moments beforehand that had given that indication, I suppose. Wearing that mask was something that it was hidden away. But she used to say, she was watching the lifestyle I was on and sometimes visiting in York to try and, do various bits and pick me up in the, because again, the way I was living and stuff, and, at home, that was all again hidden away behind closed doors. It was very opposite from the man you portrayed out in the street or at work, home life again, where just renting a room, it was just in chaos. It was in squalor sort of thing, really. And just, I was wetting myself every night going to drink. I was kind of just couldn't sustain that. I was drinking myself absolutely to a point of blackout and shut off every night. And, falling in the street on the way home sometimes and hearing stories the next day from someone who was going to work that used to come in the pub for a casual 2 pints on a Friday, and they'd be going, "Oh, I saw this guy the other day," just falling down in the
Mm.
middle, sort of 8 o'clock in the morning when they're in the queue going to work, and so the signs were there from other people, but I was kind of living these double lives in some sort of settings. But it was more that sort of that interaction of people, the worry, I suppose, and what felt like bother at the time to me. People bothering and worrying. Don't worry about me. Why are you worried about me? I'm not worried about me. Again, lowest priority. So that was difficult to contend with. But it really was, I suppose, it was kind of a bounce off rock bottom for me that moment. I kind of hit the floor, bounced back up, and just continued on for a bit. But it was 2016 that I really slammed back into that sort of crevice, I suppose, and that was really the moment of change going forward. Again, throughout all this, like, I somehow found myself in a relationship, something that I really wanted, sharing love with somebody else and experiences. And of course, I suppose I was already in a relationship at the time. I was already in one with the drink.
with the booze.
Mm.
Absolutely, absolutely. But again, that was still trying to get tucked away. It was kind of trying to get brushed under the carpet. But naturally, as you spend more time with somebody, because again, quite solitary before, you lived your own pattern, your own timetable. Naturally, that was causing frictions. It was kind of we lived very different lives. She worked sort of 9 to 5. I worked sort of more odd shifts in the pub. So I was weaving this lifestyle around it, trying to get what I dubbed as my quota each night, sort of that elixir, that
Yeah, of
drink, getting
course.
me to that moment of just, my head feels free now. But that always naturally came with the fall quite quickly. And it was causing, yeah, obviously it was causing lots of, arguments and head clashes and various bits there and, letting her down and various bits and stuff. But alcohol was still my priority internally, and I was still putting it ahead of everything else. And one particular moment, we'd had a big argument. Again, all related around the drink. It was never about my own actions. I wasn't, an aggressive person in bits in there. It was just purely based on, my
Mm.
extracurricular activities, I suppose. And I went out, I suppose, as always with these arguments, I wouldn't face them head on. I'd just go, again, they're blaming the alcohol. I'm just here to have a drink again, because that makes sense, doesn't it? And I head straight out.
There you have it.
And at this one moment, I went out and I acted unfaithfully to my partner at the time. And, something that really, it's probably the hardest thing to really to look back on to try and explain for myself, really, because it was the moment that was such out of character for me. But rightly so, it was the end of that relationship. And things really became crashing down for me at that moment. It was someone that I deeply loved. We were sort of building a life going forward together, but I was stuck in this addiction pattern at the time, that I couldn't get out of this pattern. And I can't blame the alcohol for my actions because I had to be accountable for those. I'd done that, but I'd done it
Mm.
under the influence and I wouldn't have done it without the influence. However, I couldn't blame the substance. It was me who'd done that. I'd hurt somebody that I loved. And that whole coming back to the start of not being that burden, this is exactly what I was doing now. I was inflicting pain on my family. I was inflicting pain on friends. I'd had sort of those ultimatums from people of maybe, can you act like this again? I don't really want to hang out with you. And I now acted this to someone that I really loved in my partner. And I think for me, it really threw me out of this world quite suddenly. The fact that I really felt very compromised as who I was. If you'd asked me to describe myself, from the minute I woke up sober, sort of thing. And again, I'm never really sober at the time, so I was drinking that much. But at that time, I'd show myself as an honest person. I was a loyal person. I was someone that, would put myself last in situations. Yet I'd acted in the opposite manner to somebody.
Mm.
So that was a real catalyst, I think, for me coming out of that world. The fact that, hang on a minute, this isn't you. This isn't me at all. How have I become this person? How have I caused this hurt to somebody? And I had to face myself up, of course, it wasn't something that I could go and push this all off and go, oh no, I've not done that, I've not done all this. I had to face this head on because I felt, well, you've done wrong, so you have to face these actions. But it was really that moment that I felt as if I was so powerless to the substance. I felt as if I really was just spending every day trying to find my next fix in little spots here. And the minute I got up, and it caused these sort of pains in my life. And so that's the moment that I really came to terms with the fact that I felt I was an alcoholic. And it was the 6th of June, 2016. And quite quickly, I decided I couldn't stay in this city any longer. I couldn't stay in York. It had become too familiar for me as a spot like that. I'd built sort of again a career now in the pub trade. It was my whole, as you mentioned, sort of in the intro, James, and various bits. It was my personality really. I was known as a
Identity.
big drinker who works in the pub trade, was out and about in the hospitality sectors, and you front a house as well, so you're kind of known in York was like a big city, a big town, really, in a way,
Hmm.
not like London. As Steve was saying, your
Yeah,
advice, it's a
no
bit
York.
more lost in that passing where York, it's a big city, certainly for my background,
A
but it
lot of
was all
pubs.
very enclosed in the city walls, so it was
Mm.
all very central. So because I worked central, you were known as a face in various bits, and it was quite,
Mm.
when you were sweeping the street in the morning, it'd be waving to so and so going to work, and
Morning, Harrison.
yeah,
Yeah, I know what you
exactly,
mean.
exactly in
It's
various
part of
bits.
your
So yeah.
identity, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
well, you
What
had a
you're
few
talking
last night,
about.
didn't you? And
Mm.
I was like that. But it was so in all that pattern, it felt as if you had to face up to these bits. You couldn't hide away from what's gone on here. So again, my hands were very much in the air, going, look, I've done this, and I've got to sort this out, and I've got to try and prove that this isn't me. And again, another quote I really loved at the time that I didn't pick up straight away at that time, but a few weeks later, was the best apology was change behavior
Mm.
in that pattern.
I've not heard that.
And really overnight, I felt as if I couldn't stay. I was living in the pub at the time. I was managing this sort of pub hotel. My relationship's just ended. I'm in this cycle of sort of familiarity going forward. And I felt as if I can't try and get out of this lifestyle in this environment.
Yeah.
So I upsticked straight. I just left. I just left. I went back to Cumbria. I didn't say goodbye to anybody. I just up and left. So the relationship had ended. I went back to my auntie's very briefly, just outside York, which felt a bit like that was a week in rehab, maybe I suppose. That was
Yeah.
my first week
That's
in sobriety, and I just tried to throw myself into different aspects. So I was very overweight again. I hadn't done any exercise for about 5 years. Such a lethargic lifestyle.
mm.
Again, I thrown my last pack of cigarettes in the bin, and I think initially, I'd got my auntie's bike out of her garage. I think I was doing a little loop round in the Yorkshire Wolds, nice and flat, thankfully, around there, as opposed to when I went back to Cumbria. But again, I was on a little bicycle, so I was on this lady's bike going around, just trying to get myself into some fitness. And I think I was
Good
using
luck.
a free pass at a gym and just trying to really make this change. And of course, I'm trying to win back this relationship, if I'm honest, at the time. I'm trying to prove that I can be somebody else. But I went back to Cumbria, and at that point, I suppose for the first time in my life, I put on my personal Facebook page at the time, what had happened, why I'd left the city, and why this was the case, and the fact that, alcohol couldn't play a part in my life, and I had to sort of sort myself out. And that was the first moment, I suppose, I'd really owned this as a problem, um, and the fact that I needed help, and I couldn't go through this myself anymore. I was trying to get through, doing my own methods, doing this, and I'll sort out what's going on. But this was when I really threw myself into, the support from friends, from peers, from medical help, fully in there, from group therapy, support things. I was fully in at that moment. But it was literally the 6th of June, 1 minute. I've been out the night before. The next, I'm back in Cumbria. I'm cold turkey. I mean, not advisable for the amounts I'm drinking at that point.
Mm.
Um, so the doctor said that to me about 2 weeks afterwards in this spot, but I was just kind of like my whole world had shifted in that passing, and I just tried to really right my wrongs, I suppose, and throw myself into a different environment. And this is where I found myself back in Cumbria, and I suppose where the next part of the story gets weaved in.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you, Harrison. And thanks so much for sharing all that. What kind of strikes me is how you literally up sticks from York and moved back home. Was that change, that complete change of environment? Do you think was that really sort of central to you being able to literally just not flick a switch? That's underplaying it, but being able to pretty much go cold turkey overnight, cutting it out, and just being in a completely different environment. What kind of impact did that have?
Well, it was you just felt as if again, personality wise, that's who I was. I was that's my whole character. You're pressing reset on a number of things. You're not only your location, your geography. It was kind of just it was me, who I am, what I do, how I socialize. It was just everything was just sort of switched. So a lot of things had to be a bit rebuilt, I suppose. But I'm very lucky to have a lot of close friends from my younger years still. A lot of close friends from school that really, I suppose, throughout these years were a lot more distant. I can understand why now looking back, but you didn't see each other as much. And I was very unreliable. I was rarely coming back. I only really ever came home for the dentist. I think I kept the dentist in locally. That was my excuse to come home.
Like we
Otherwise,
all do.
otherwise it was just purely that lifestyle. That was all I was doing, and just didn't really want to be doing anything else. So, but lucky to have these people that I suppose. And this is the moment that, again, I've said lucky about 2 or 3 times there, but I think this is the moment I really do appreciate because for many people, I understand there's a point where the unconditional love from friends and family does run out. If this continues on, the ultimatums continue in various patterns there's a moment where perhaps you do lose somebody in that pattern. There might be that catalyst for a moment of change going forward, but might not be. And I had to
Mm.
feel very lucky for the fact that I'd had this moment. I'm 25 at this point here. This could have carried on for a number of years going forward. But a lot of these friends were still there for me. They were hanging on just at this moment. And the
Mm.
fact I come out of this path, really feeling so vulnerable, sort of mentioning that and trying to just, again, all really for that partner, really, putting myself out there, going, look, putting myself out for the public flogging, really it was. It was kind of, that's what I was doing. I was going, look, I've hurt somebody here. This is what I've done, knock me down. And the fact that those friends and family, at that moment, really, of what I felt most vulnerable for me, really feeling I was going to be judged, feeling I was going to be really, sinned or, or outcast,
Mm.
they gathered round, they got in touch, they were there to do various bits. And that show of support and love really is the reason I'm able to sort of talk about this now in a different position in life.
Yeah.
That was the moment. And that is a privilege. I think sometimes I do various talks at various events. You can't shy away from that. You can't shy that I had a great support network.
Mm.
And I think, and I appreciate not everybody has that in terms of very close, but there's always fantastic helplines out there. You have coaches like yourself, there's medical help out there. There is always somebody to speak to. You're not alone through this. But
100%.
I was extra lucky in the fact that I had that support network as well. So it was the different environment was a huge thing because I think there was a lot of familiarity in
Yeah.
that setting. So pulling myself out of that just meant as if I had a different space to reset, I suppose.
Mm.
But it was the people gathering around and the support and the encouragement moving forward. But of course, you can't also go and just put this onto everybody else. I was doing it as well myself. I suppose I had to take some credit, I suppose.
Mm.
And each bit was me, my focus and going forward to do that. But it was people that were coming to join me on these bits that were encouraging me on. So I tried to throw myself into fitness. I mentioned the bicycle. There was little bits in the gym at the point. I tried to take myself walking just around the local town. I got my old bike back out myself, back home, and did my local routes out there. And then one friend turns at my doorstep and says, let's go for a hike in the mountains, mate. I said, eh? You what? Well, yeah, they're just down the road. They're beautiful, the Lake District. Yeah, right, yeah, yeah. Right, we can do. I've never been out in these mountains before in my life. I've literally grew up on the doorstep. You see these in the distance all the time. Beautiful vista. Appreciated the fact that it's pretty special, but I'd never embraced these at all. Again, maybe I'd go down for maybe a coffee in Keswick. I think the last time I was in Keswick in the Lake District was probably for a beer festival actually. So there was quite a different visit this time in that setting. And he turns up at my doorstep again. I didn't drive at this time either. I didn't have anything. I was completely broken. I mean, financially, I'm all over the place. Riddled with debt and burning through sort of savings accounts, all through this sort of lifestyle. So life is very much completely starting again from the bottom. So I'm back at my mum's. My friend turns up at my mum's door and says, "Right." And I just put on what I had to hand. I'm going for a hike, so again, I just put on what I'd put on, I suppose, if I was going to the gym, but with a slightly warmer top layer. So, so I had a jump pad maybe way down the pub on a Friday. I had some swimming shorts on, I think, at the time, and I had scabby trainers
I
on.
just picture it now.
Honestly, yeah, they're the sort of ones that pop up in the local newspapers now, especially in the summer these days. And he sort of said, "Mate, you can't go like that. So you can't go walking." So I said, "Well, I haven't got anything else." And we jumped in the car and he drove us into the Lake District and he pulled up at this outdoor store. He said, "What size shoe are you?" I said, "Oh, I'm 12." Grabbed this pair of boots off the shelf and just bought me these boots. And it was a huge show again of that support network, as I mentioned. Again, someone there that was just encouraging this new sort of life step. Another 20 minutes later, we pull up at this car park and I look up to this absolute behemoth of a mountain in Blencathra, for those that know the Lake District.
Mm.
So it's a bit of a baptism of fire, to put it lightly. It was one of the higher mountains in the Lake District, and for someone that again has spent their only real exercise walking from pub to pub, or maybe up the stairs to his lodging,
To the bathroom
it
and
was
back.
or lifting the old keg back onto the
Yeah.
rack to settle. It was a very different sort of pattern. So I'm absolutely blowing out my proverbial going up this hill. It just there's no time for taking any selfies. I've not got a Strava. I'm checking how I'm doing up the hillside. I'm just literally going, how does this become over? Just the legs burning, just sort of staring at my feet. But eventually, God knows how long it took us, but some patience on him. But reaching this sort of summit circle at the top of this mountaintop, and there wasn't any views to really embrace on that day. It was really overcast. But he just looked at me, and I'm sort of feeling, thank God it's over. I'm not really feeling anything else at the time. He just looks at me and says, "Right, next week we're going to do Helvellyn."
Oof.
And again, for those that don't know, Helvellyn is the third highest mountain in the Lake District. It's
Mm.
950 meters, and we did it from the sort of Filmere Reservoir side, which is basically just one steep staircase to the summit of the mountain. So it's probably one of the highest sort of climbs, I suppose, you can do in terms of gaining altitude at pace. It just literally just marching straight up to the summit, 950 meters. So this day was a beautiful June day, blue skies, you see sort of barely a cloud. But again, just sort of heading up this sort of stone staircase, one foot in front of the other. Again, that similar bit, not really taking in, going, "Oh, this is great, really enjoying this."
Mm.
Just thinking, "Oh, right, come on!" But I'm so motivated to make this change, to try and prove I'm not this person, that I guess it felt like I was having my own like 80s movie montage
I can just picture the
in
Rocky
some
Four
ways.
training music.
It
I'm
was, yeah.
picturing.
The Rocky Four soundtrack was blasting in my ears behind me. Some Bonnie Tyler.
I have that
I
on
was
when I
kind
run.
of just going to go forward, just up these hills, or again, it was to the gym and just trying to push forward, trying to be better than I was previously every day. And of course, each day I was getting to midnight, I was another day away, another day sobriety, and it was just all these PBs and these just constant changes moving forward. But alongside, I'm journaling quite a lot at this moment as well. I'm using that sort of as a tool, sort of going forward. I'm speaking to people. I'm speaking sort of to a sort of a substance abuse counsellor. I found myself in group therapy later on that I didn't realize at the time ended up being AA. It was kind of not told to me as AA, but I was kind of going, "Oh right, you've come to the end of the one-on-one therapies now. There's some group therapy we can put you towards." And I walked in the room, and all of a sudden it was all the chairs, and my name's Harrison, and I'm an alcoholic, and it wasn't the words I said for a number of weeks because I didn't really, I couldn't really believe I was in that room, to be honest. But that was a different one again. I think that's helped many people in various patterns. I think it was part of my journey, but I didn't feel it wasn't the right place for me in terms of my particular path. I followed my own sort of route in some ways, but I
Yeah.
did really get a lot of value from being in a room with like-minded people.
Mm,
But there was a heavy blame on alcohol I found in that room at the time, rather than the reasons why we were drinking.
I think you're
Um,
spot on with that. I think
and
it.
that's the bit that just didn't quite sing with me at the time.
I think that's a lot of people's experience with AA. I think clearly the power of the community is the main strength of AA, but a lot of people it just doesn't resonate with them. And I actually think to an extent, people who perhaps have suspect that they're drinking too much are put off from change because they think that is potentially the only avenue for them, and it doesn't always resonate with everybody.
Mm.
And yeah, it's a really it's a really powerful share there. You mentioned earlier there about journaling, which is something I wanted to ask you about because I've heard you speak about journaling before, and it's something that I always encourage coaching clients to do, and it's something that I've done for for a couple of years, and it's helped me through some tougher times. What sort of things do you journal about? What kind of prompts do you use?
Yeah, so I literally, I suppose I wouldn't know if there's a method or anything to various bits. I kind of just saw it always almost the Dear Diary type sort of setting, but without writing those first two words. I didn't give it a name or anything. I just kind of just started. So I think I just put the date in the corner. I just sit there and just spill out really what I've done that day or what I'm thinking about that day. So it was actually something that really, I mean, I have to show a lot of appreciation and love for that ex-partner still, really, even now. I mean, I'm in a very great relationship now. A lot of dust in the back these days, but she gave me a journal at the start of this path, and she said, "I've got you this. I think you should start writing down how you feel." And I think at the time I thought, "What the hell's that going to do? Just sitting and writing in a little book? I mean, behave." I was kind of absolutely no, thank you. But she was so selfless at the start of this journey. She didn't have to be. I'd really hurt her. We're not in touch anymore. But initially, she really was putting herself, despite the pain she was feeling, and almost, I suppose, the hatred in a way of me, was also trying to encourage me on this path. Distantly, of course, when she was back in York at the time. But the journaling started because of her,
Mm.
because she bought me this book and gave me this book. Now, I'm not sure the actual date I actually picked up the book first and first wrote in it, but it was certainly within the first maybe 3 weeks or so. I think. It may have even been earlier. I think I was writing down sort of how far I'd gone on the bike ride and how far I'd done, and I'd done some sit-ups and some press. I was writing those down the day, and ticking the days of sobriety off. But I think it was the first few weeks that I started sitting down in places, and because again, I still didn't want to be stuck in my own four walls like previously. So I was trying to go out to different environments. And the hiking was great for that because it was quite an elongated activity. So there's a really big void in my life from alcohol disappearing.
Mhm.
But that was something that filled quite a big void. Now, again, I appreciate not everyone's really close to the mountains in there, but finding some green space or finding some, gym to go to in that place for that similar aspects. Because I really think that that physical activity was a huge, huge, big thing for me. That endorphin hit I was getting, that dopamine rush was
Yeah,
really
definitely.
powerful because that's the bit I see really from alcohol for me. I mean, I could have found myself on many different avenues, but ultimately, we just want to be happy.
Mm.
We want to find that dopamine hit.
Mm.
And for me, I found that in a pint glass for quite a while. But as time went on, that hit got less and less and less. I was chasing it more and more and more, and then it crashed. But in this way now, I was trying to find that in different patterns, but I was trying to find more positive vices as opposed to maybe these negative vices. But it's still a vice. I mean, even in terms of me, maybe that's just the character I am, but still through exercise, through fitness, that became something that I was maybe overdoing at times as well and going, just wanting more of that. But so I found myself sitting down in different environments, so little cafes, and I was taking myself to the pub actually quite a few, which again was non-advisable to anybody else. But again, another quote I loved was, "The more times you sit in the barber's chair, the more likely you are to get a haircut."
Love that.
And
I love
and I was
it.
taking myself to the pub because I didn't really enjoy that environment socially, and I didn't want it to become a
Mm.
taboo in my life because I appreciate the fact that those friends I had around me, they weren't problem drinkers. They weren't, middle grey drinkers, a bit in there. Weren't alcoholics. They were just people that enjoyed a glass of wine, on a social occasion, or had an odd blowout once, twice a year. So I knew that in my life, alcohol wasn't going to play a part anymore, but my life was going to carry on, and I had to make sure of that. And obviously, there was going to be weddings, there was going to be events, birthdays. The alcohol's going to be around there. I didn't want to feel as if I couldn't be in those rooms and those moments. Now, again, that's a very individual thing. Somebody, might not feel comfortable there, and I think you should always protect yourself and walk out that room if you feel as if you're not comfortable. You're tempted to pick a drink up again. But for me, I didn't want to be someone that was, crossing the road and I was walking past a pub or going down a different lane at the supermarket because I'd found myself walking down the wine aisle, and it was just that taboo factor. So I actually started taking myself to the pub, and I'd sit in the corner with this journal, and I'd have a tonic or soft drink in the pub at the time. Now I do enjoy like an alcohol-free beer or anything these days. I
Mm.
don't find those a placebo effect for me. I do find the spirits and things a bit placebo for me. I don't touch those because they give me this little. I say it's a bit akin to Popeye and his spinach. I sometimes feel a little bit like, there's something running through me a little bit.
Tingle.
And
Mm.
I just
Yeah,
think, no,
yeah.
I don't want that. So I just don't touch those. So again,
That's
it's knowing
interesting.
those boundaries. Some people may not want to touch an alcohol-free beer at all. Again, personal choice in that pattern. Now, there was a moment that I ordered a tonic because I felt a tonic was quite a nice sort of slow drink. Coke or something, it seemed to fly down you quite quickly. And it seemed as if my options were, alcoholism or diabetes at one point. So I was kind of trying to something else in those pockets. So, but a tonic was quite slow. But at one moment, I picked up this glass and I put it to my lips, and I suddenly got this sort of hit of like juniper, and I just said, at the moment, it sort of flashed in my mind of going, I think there's gin in this, and I was about a month sober at this point, and that's sort of again that sort of inner monologue comes out and just sort of goes, you could have this and nobody would know. You could drink this. And I was kind of at this pattern. I said to the guy behind the bar, I just said, "Is there gin in this?" He said, "Yeah, it's what you asked for, gin and tonic." I said, "No, no, I asked just for a tonic." He said, "Oh, I'm sorry about that." And I literally just put it down, walked out. I just walked out. I just because I thought there was a moment of I would have drunk that glass.
Fear.
I could see I was kind of going, "Oh,
Yeah.
I couldn't have this. No, only me and him know. What's the problem?" And again, this was patterns that again that sort of that barber's chair sort of analogy I said. This was kind of sort of stuff that I still don't mind those environments, but I found myself heading into more coffee shops at this point and sitting down with my journal and just writing things down in there. And I found that a really sort of quite cathartic experience, really. And that's going to continue for a long spell. And journaling, whilst it's something that I don't do a lot of these days. I do try and sit down every now and again, but I was very sort of strict and disciplined with it at this point. It was a daily practice for me. It was something that I was doing all the time, and it really helped me, I think, just dump things down on that page. But
Mm.
also looking back, it was sometimes you get a bit blind to your progress as well. I think looking back,
Yeah,
sometimes seeing that was really
definitely.
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think stacking those small wins as well. Journals help
Yeah.
you to track how far you've come because we very much take what we've already done for granted and be like, "Oh, it's always about the next thing." And I think the power of journaling from a gratitude point of view is it enables you to appreciate A, what you've already achieved and what you already have, rather than focusing on what you don't have, which we naturally do as human beings. We always want the next thing, but journaling helps you show just how far you've come and what you already have, not what you feel you want. And yeah, I think journaling is such a powerful tool for mental health because it really gives you that space to. You can use it in two ways. You can use it to get get all that stuff out of you that you want to kind of process, but also to as a gratitude tool. And I think it's absolutely fantastic for that.
And it was something that naturally evolved for me, I guess. That I suppose the next sort of chapter of this bit was kind of me sharing quite publicly really what was going on in my life now. And when I set up sort of my Instagram account at the time, I've kind of jumped on a little bit in terms of where the food comes into things. But I chose looking back a pseudonym, a nickname, because I was still really wearing a bit of a mask. I think looking back, I didn't really think this at the time, but I didn't put a picture of me on. I didn't share any photos of me. It was a different. I called myself the Fell Foodie, which again we call the hills fells in the
Mm.
north of England.
Yeah.
So it was merging
Uh-huh.
two passions of fells and food, and it was just me really documenting this recovery, this love of being in the outdoors, and the fact that it felt like that was somewhere that really gave me that escapism with that dopamine boost that I mentioned before, without that negative crash in
Hmm.
patterns there. It was kind of just the insignificance almost of my problems being out in these wide, expansive environments as well, and doing something that was just very human and just very natural, I think, being out there, just in the outdoors, really where we're designed to be. It was sharing that story, and it was also sharing at the time food I was cooking at home in the kitchen. So there was no pictures of me, nothing what I was doing, no little stories other than sort of anonymous tales. And food was always a huge passion of mine when I was growing up. I love sort of watching cooking shows on the telly. I love sort of how people brought people together again. A bit again like different cultures where our culture seemed to be very much down the pub. Maybe because of the sort of the dark, wet nights we have most of the time, sort of this time of year. But but on the continent, it seemed a lot more about people gathering sort of in the street round a table. And I suppose there was maybe still drink flowing, but it was about that community aspect through food and that conduit. So I really enjoyed that growing up, where it was gathering around with the family and things, and doesn't happen quite enough these days, I think, in families and friends. But that was something that going forward, coming out of this side of things, whilst I appreciated food a lot in the pub trade and the hospitality trade, I was kind of someone that was more picking a few chips out of the kitchen or, falling in the kebab shop on the way home. I was seeing great dishes come out the kitchen and I was able to sort of talk to chefs and pick up different secrets and bits there. And my intrigue was there, but I wasn't practicing at the time because, again, I was just going out and getting blottoed. But but it was something that on the other side it was a big focus of me. I found it quite a mindful practice cooking in the kitchen. I found it again somewhere that would stop a lot of thoughts, bringing something together, the creative aspects, but also the fuel and how I was fueling myself. It was a much healthier fuel source,
Of course.
making something from scratch with fruit, vegetables, meats, various bits or various pulses for proteins, and as opposed to just buying something quick and convenient, which we have quite a symbiosis with in this country. I think we're very much a quick, convenient
Mm.
culture with food here,
I always think
and
that
that
you
was a big
can't
thing.
you can't convenience and health doesn't they don't go together. If you want
Yeah, there's no
convenience,
quick wins, is there? No quick
there's not.
wins.
You've got to put the time in. Sorry, I interrupted you there. Carry on.
No, no, please. But again, this is it's and that was something that I think, yeah. So that was going on behind the scenes. So not only was it the fitness side of things, the alcohol had been left behind. It was now my diet was getting looked at. I was seeking the medical help. So there's numerous sort of pillars to this. It's not just a case of right, stop doing that. Everything's going to be fine now. There was a lot of things I had to look at, bits that perhaps had leached in because of that lifestyle that alcohol was that pillar to it all, and all of a sudden everything else starts sort of getting pulled towards it and becoming more negative as well. So it was really resetting across the board in various bits. So, but then again, I mentioned the Instagram sort of starts again. So that was the food bit. The fells were the other side of things, what I was doing, and share my journey. And the journaling's where I was coming onto through all this because that became my natural evolution. I felt to me journaling in the cafes or the pubs was now me sharing this online, like a bit of an online journal. So I suppose it was, previously it was blogs, but now it had moved on to sort of Instagram and stuff, and it was before video sort of came about. So it was quite long captions and just a an image of the wonderful fells, and me sort of dumping sort of my thoughts for the day of what had gone on and the journey I was on.
Mhm.
So it was a natural evolution there to using an online journal, I suppose. So it was continuing on behind the scenes. So it wasn't something I left behind. It was just continuing and evolving to patterns. But it wasn't really until my second year sober. So it was 2018. So the 6th of June 2018 now. And I'm now regularly sort of in the mountains. At this point, so I'm 2 years sober. I've lost about 7 stone in weight. I'm now, I ran a marathon. I was running these fells. I was a completely different lifestyle to what I was before. I was in a good, stable 9 to 5 job. I'd moved to the Lake District. Life couldn't have been more different from where I was 2 years prior. I mean, my life was like this a year after I left York, but this is now 2 years
Mm.
down
That's
the line.
incredible transformation.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I mean, really, I think for those around me, it was crazy for me, but I do think sometimes I think about for those close to me that have known me before and after. There's people you meet along the way, but they don't see the previous you sometimes.
No.
But for them seeing that change, it must have been like, he's doing what now? Like, especially for those who are slightly more distant, or you catch it once, twice a year. Because I literally, couldn't run a bath at one point. The next minute, I'm stomping up this hillside. Then I'm, hiking up this decent speed. Then I'm running down boats. Then I'm running the marathon. Then I'm running up these hills. Like it literally
Yeah.
was.
It's incredible what you
it's,
can achieve when you
it's
haven't got alcohol holding you back.
for
And
sure, for sure,
it's
and
unbelievable.
just what is possible in a year as well. I
Yeah,
think what
yeah.
is possible to make that change if you're determined to do so with the right sort of parameters and the support alongside. Again, as we said, with coaches or medical help and various bits there, that support network. It was just absolutely was a different life, and
Mm.
really was becoming the man that I always wanted to be in some ways. And it's important, to say that I wasn't free from my sort of mental turmoil during all this, and I still don't think I am now. That's something that I've learned to sort of live with and manage with. That was something that came in my teenage years, that was before alcohol even became part of my life. But I have much better coping strategies for that now, rather than just drinking myself to blackout.
Mm.
Like, can you give us some examples of that?
Well, I mean, I've touched upon many. I mean, that's a kind of obviously the fitness is a huge one. That hiking, being out there, the journaling we touched on before, speaking to other people, being open to other stuff there, not being afraid to ask for help. I think it's great. I think understanding sometimes putting yourself first and not feeling guilty about that. I think there's some times that you may not want to be in a certain situation. I think it's okay to not go to those and to spend back. It's not a case of have to be suddenly living the life of a saint. There's many days that I just want to sit and just binge a TV series at home and don't go up the hillside and bits and stay there. And that's fine. That's almost some self care in different ways sometimes. So it's all these patterns again. How I'm fueling myself with the food. These are all those sort of methods I think going forward that I
Mm.
do notice that you still have to reset and pull yourself back onto those lines sometimes. But that there are. Uh, I do notice if they're almost non-negotiables for me now, I suppose, and sometimes they slip. I mean, I think the recent sort of years through various bits since lockdown and more recently, I've unfortunately lost my dad this year and stuff quite suddenly, and moments like that they rock the apple cart at some point, and that's important. I think to know that life isn't going to be plain sailing going
No.
forward.
I
Alcohol
think
sometimes has been the moment you're using to sort of try and get away from these paths. These aren't just suddenly going to disappear because you left alcohol behind either, but it's learning to manage those better. And I see it, if you look at it as mountains and crevasses before, for me it becomes more sort of peaks and valleys. It's far sort of more shallower gradients in path, and you've still got to ride those ups and downs, but you just learn to manage those a lot better, and it becomes a smoother journey going forward.
I think I think Harrison, there are so many metaphors that come out of your switch to one question. Do you still have those boots? Because what a turning point in your life those boots became. Because we share quite a lot of interest, and this isn't a podcast about me, but I fell in love with the outdoors. And I think when you talk there about what a beautiful part of the country you live in, and that was on your doorstep, and not not being aware of that because of the part that alcohol played in your life for so long, and then your friend making that move of giving you those boots and taking you up. There's so many metaphors of conquering that mountain and where it's taken you since. And we often talk about what we feel we'll lose when we give up drinking. And I think in our discussion with you today is just an absolute goldmine of the things that you can gain. And you're absolutely right. And on a fellow podcast, and I've heard you on there before, that Shaz from Over the Influence always says that, when you give up alcohol, it's not all unicorns farting glitter. And I think that's such a true thing to say. Life still has its ups and downs, but what you've shown is the ability to cope that, and just removing that one thing, and the change that's made in your life. How does that make you feel now?
Yeah, I think it just. I mean, I touched on before. I've just become that person I wanted to be really in some patterns, and I think it's not about fixing all either. But I just know I'm a far better son, far better brother, far better sort of boyfriend, friend to people these days without that going. And there are moments sometimes where you think, well, I've got quite a different mindset now. I
Mm.
was drinking on a very negative mindset. Perhaps I'd be fine now. Perhaps I could have one and do various bits. And I know some people are reintroducing various bits there, and that's very much on them. But for me, I just don't see the risk as worth it at all. I think for what I've gained since then, from that new lifestyle, new patterns, I've had, health wise, I learned to drive, new relationship, just, new career, everything is different and everything has improved. I'm not saying again it's going to be that golden switch for everybody in various patterns, but some things will definitely improve. And even if that's just sort of personal aspects in yourself and how you're managing sort of your day to day, it, it can't not make things harder.
Mm.
It doesn't make anything better
No,
in various patterns there, but
no.
but it's important. I mean, I've never tried to become I suppose a preacher in any settings and stuff about there, because I do see it as very much a personal thing. And I think some people can go in and maybe enjoy one or two drinks, and then I do think there's a mindset thing to these stuff sometimes, that certain people are more susceptible perhaps to falling down that slope more so. I know sort of the addictive mindset thing is sort of proven false sort of bits in there, but it's kind of there's aspects that, yeah, I think it's just being wary. I know if you're more susceptible to those things, because I have found that definitely with food. Food is a tough one because it's a huge passion of mine, but that's something that I also struggle with moderation with. I often joke, it's been alcohol, it's been exercise, hobnobs. I'm saying I can't put them down
I've
at
not down.
times.
That's a biscuit for dipping.
And it's and that's one that, I mean, certainly again we go through this journey now, and it's like that it doesn't stop there. For example, it doesn't go, oh wow, he's running, he's climbing the hills now, he's doing the running. There's been some very rocky times since then for me. I mean, in lockdown, I did really struggle with. I put a lot of weight back on. I'm still sort of trying to manage that little pattern there. Things change and move forward. This isn't a linear journey on various patterns, but again, both in that and both in the recent loss of my dad, these are two moments that I could quite easily have reached for a pint glass and just had that escape, had that shut off from the world for a bit. Just gone, look, there's too much going on. I've got too much in my head. Just give me a break and have a drink. But I haven't. And that really is something that I'm very proud of going forward, really. And if I fell back on eating a few more pizzas because of it, then,
Mm.
it's absolutely fine.
No
It's
one's perfect.
understandable because
Yeah.
the big things to go through, and life hits it with these things at times, and you do need certain outlets and stuff to go through. But yeah, I'm still trying to really weave in sort of the same discipline sort of running pattern I had maybe back then and stuff. Hopefully we'll get back to various bits, but you find different methods and means, and it's always adapting certain patterns. But yeah, throughout all this, there's at no point when I go, if alcohol was part of my life during this moment, things would have been better.
Mm.
I,
Listen, listen, Harrison. We could talk all day. I genuinely mean that. I feel that we could make two or three podcasts from this conversation. And where now is so what's next for you? I mean, the Fell Foodie has landed so well. Where's this going for you now? What's the future look like?
It's a difficult question, isn't it? That's probably one of the most difficult ones, really. I think it's always hard. I've always struggled looking ahead, really. I think I'm always very, again, the whole sort of one thing I did take maybe from AA was that sort of one day at a time approach. I think I do enjoy that aspect in there. Just that's as far as I plan, really. But yeah, I mean, I've been so lucky in some of the opportunities I've had in various bits from taking that sort of journey to speaking out about, my own personal problems that initially was just on a small Instagram page that just began to sort of build a bit of a following, went into being sort of, to some local publications, local television, to national publications and magazines. And then, as you touched upon in the intro, ended up sort of on the BBC baking a cake for Mary Berry somehow.
that's brilliant. I love it.
Talking about deepest, darkest secrets whilst looking onto Blencathra, that mountain that started this whole journey. Like it was a real full cycle moment.
Wow.
And I've been lucky to go on the television the second time. I was on Winter on the Farm with Dr. Amir Khan. He doesn't get nearly enough mention compared to Mary, but I'm afraid that's always going to be the way when you introduce Dame Mary, isn't it? In patterns there, but. And now I've managed to make this into really never planned it, but this has become sort of what I do sort of full time in sort of patterns and going around doing various corporate speaking at schools, at corporates and festivals and events, and just sort of showcasing, I suppose, that hope and that promise and that change that is possible through these things. And I suppose again trying to really deplete that stigma around mental health as well, because that is the root cause of all this for me. It's not alcohol was kind of a symptom of that.
Yeah.
In ways, I could have found myself in different patterns, but that was a very accessible one and one that's very ingrained again into the culture that we're here and very much again. They often say that the only drug you've got to explain why you're not taking it.
Yeah,
you're so right.
Exactly.
So
I think alcohol really gets a free pass when it comes to mental health. I think we talk about mental health and we talk about alcohol, but they're very rarely linked together, despite the depression, the stress, the anxiety. But it's a great point. Everything you spoke about there, Harrison, in terms of all the activities that you're working on and your media work and Instagram, where can people find out more about you if they just want to follow you or if they want to work with you?
Yeah, please. Yes, so I'm known as Fell Foodie across all platforms. That's Fell Fell Foodie with an IE, and again, it's all me behind these platforms. There's no sort of management team or various bits in there, so you'll come straight through to me, and I always try to answer everything I get that comes through because I think that's important to do so. And it's important to stress that I'm not a medical professional. But I'm more than happy to share, obviously, my lived experience with anybody going through these bits, whether it's them or various partners or stuff. But even in the outdoors side, if there's some cooking tips out there, more than happy with any sort of patterns or aspects. So you can find me on those avenues there. But what's ahead in the future, again, I don't know. I'm enjoying the journey, where it's going for the future, and we'll see. Yeah, again, there's a life ahead to look forward to now, and previously I think I wasn't looking much further than the next glass.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. You can come and set up your camping stove next to a race one day and catch all us ultra runners coming through instead of us having to eat Haribos and crisps. Sounds good to me.
It'll have to be done, absolutely. I know you're kind of the antithesis to me, sort of the very very lightweight ultra runners out there, and I'm kind of anything but with my rucksack going up the hillside. But no, definitely. Well, hopefully we sort something in the flesh in the future.
That sounds amazing.
Amazing. It's been brilliant to me, Harrison. Thanks so much for coming on. Honestly, I was absolutely loving hearing your story. Thank you so much for sharing it. I'm sure you'll inspire a lot more people.
Thank you both for your time.
Thanks so much.
All the best.
Take care.